Our speaker today is Gil Garcetti, the nationally recognized district attorney for Los Angeles County. Mr. Garcetti was born in Los Angeles, educated in Los Angeles public schools, graduated from USC, and received his law degree from UCLA. He has been in Los Angeles' district attorney's office for 28 years and is presently serving his second four-year term as district attorney for Los Angeles County. He is definitely not an outsider. The City Club of Portland has just completed this significant research study that we've just mentioned concerned with domestic violence. October is National Domestic Violence Awareness Week. Few Americans are better qualified to address the subject of domestic violence than Gil Garcetti. He created the LA District Attorney's first Family Violence Division and has made the prevention of domestic violence and child abuse a prime focus of his office. The Safe-Way-Out Hotline he initiated is a toll-free service in 6 languages which directly connects victims with shelters. He has additionally led legislative and judicial efforts to protect these victims. Mr. Garcetti has also directed his attention to hate crimes, white-collar crimes, gang terrorism, school retention efforts, and crime prevention programs. A plate full of significant items and no small task for the leader of the largest district attorney's office in the country with over 3,300 employees. Mr. Garcetti lives with his wife, a Reed College graduate and member of the Reed Board, in Los Angeles. She chairs a charitable foundation that supports community efforts. I'm sure he is greatly complimented that his own daughter is a deputy district attorney. His son is a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford. How fortunate we are and how pleased I am to be able to present to you Mr. Gil Garcetti to discuss with us today means of ending the cycle of domestic violence. Please welcome Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you to Fran for the warm introduction, but special thanks to the City Club for making this possible. I turned down most speaking opportunities out of state for good reason. I could be out of state more than I am in state if I were to accept those speaking invitations, but there's always a draw when the invitation has to do with domestic violence. And of course, once I was given a copy of your report, I was so impressed with this report. I really was. I said, boy, now this is a town that really knows really how to put it together and how to focus on public awareness on this issue. So when Harriet gave me the phone call, you usually don't say, if you don't know Harriet Glickman, you usually don't say no to Harriet Glickman anyway, but the invitation was to come, and I frankly very happily accepted. And this is a good opportunity. You will hear me in a monologue a little longer than I would ordinarily go, but I've been asked to be fairly direct in my comments, but then open it up to dialogue. And I really look forward to that dialogue because I learn, frankly, perhaps even more than you do during a dialogue. And so please, if you disagree with anything that I say, please don't hesitate to disagree. If you have observations or comments, I solicit those observations and comments. What I will do, just in terms of, so that you know where I will be going, I'm going to talk about domestic violence as you perhaps perceive it, but I want to try and help you expand your definition of what domestic violence is and the horror and the consequences of domestic violence. I will end up by talking about some more things that you can do as citizens, as organizations, as leaders in our community as we look at this issue of domestic violence. But first, let me give you I think some things that will lead up to that, some things that I believe are important. 6 years ago, after 23 years in the district attorney's office, frankly, I contemplated joining a large law firm at a much greater salary that I can earn in the district attorney's office. But I was doing it because I was hoping to secretly fund an ambition of mine, and that is to become a private photographer, just a real photographer out there, away from the world of law. I had enough of that, almost. But then, as one does, when you begin to ponder moving on, I took a good look. Took a good look around me, looked at crime in Los Angeles, looked at my family, looked at the desire that both my son and daughter will want to remain in Los Angeles. When you put all that together, you begin to question, all right, are they going to be another of the exodus to Oregon or to Idaho or to Washington, whatever. My wife and I, as you heard, are natives of Los Angeles. We plan on staying there, and I'd love to see my grandchildren in Los Angeles. So there's a real personal reason why I was going to get involved. I decided that, and I mean this with humility, that as district attorney, as the elected district attorney, I could really do something to make our community safer and a place where more families would want to remain. And so I did, in fact, run for district attorney. I set goals, and my goals were to reduce violent crime through more effective prosecution, to do for domestic violence what Mothers Against Drunk Driving had done for the area of drunk driving, to help prevent child abuse, to bring juvenile justice into the 21st century, to revamp our huge family support operation to see that children are in fact supported as they should be, and to work with children to keep them in school and to prevent crime in the future, not simply to react to the latest crime, put someone else in prison, but actually try and do some things that will stop the crime before it happens. I thought, frankly, as district attorney, I'd be working relatively quietly in somewhat obscurity in Los Angeles. But as we know, events sometimes overtake even our best desires. I could never have imagined what was going to ensue in my first 4 years as district attorney. That people, frankly, in Tierra del Fuego would feel that they knew some people in the district attorney's office on a first-name basis. Well, all through this, I have, in fact, I think, realized many of our goals. We have a long way to go, but we have reduced violent crime in Los Angeles, as violent crime has, in fact, been reduced, I think, throughout the country. We've been much more effective in prosecuting child abuse cases. We greatly have improved our juvenile laws. We formed a crime prevention unit and broadened our anti-truancy program so that we've worked with more than 30,000 children in Los Angeles County in the last 4 years to keep them in school, away from gangs, and away from drugs. Our child support collections have jumped over 70% in 4 years. So we really have done some marvelous things. But it's in the prevention of domestic violence that I believe I've had the greatest impact. I took the lead first within my own office, and you have to understand our office was just like every other prosecutorial office. Oh, domestic violence cases, please. Me, the prosecutor, saying, I don't want to handle that case. You know, the witness is always going to turn on you. They're going to say we kissed, made up, and let us go from there. I understand that. But I took the lead from within my office, setting what the priorities were going to be, and that only specially trained, sensitive prosecutors are going to be handling these cases. I did the same with law enforcement, with police, probation office, and others. Understand, by law, the district attorney in our state is the chief law enforcement officer of the county. Not sure what that means, but that's what I am. So I took that seriously, and I said, let me move forward. I have 43 police departments in the county of Los Angeles. I mean, you know the size of Los Angeles. It's just so huge. We have over 9 million people. We're larger than 42 states in the country by itself. So trying to lead a group like that, you can imagine the undertaking. Nevertheless, I continue working with the legislature, with judges, with members of the community, and frankly, it wasn't just Los Angeles, but it was beyond Los Angeles at that time, to get the community and others involved, focused for the first time perhaps in a broad way on domestic violence. I've been told that this past summer was a domestic violence nightmare for you in Portland here, that even a police officer was a homicide victim in a domestic violence case. We've had some impact in Los Angeles. When I came in as district attorney, my first year as district attorney, we had 79 domestic violence homicide cases in the county of Los Angeles. That's one domestic violence murder case every 4.6 days in Los Angeles County. And it cuts across the spectrum of people. You know, this is not a brown issue, it's not a black issue, it's not a low-income area. It cuts across it all. It's there, and I'm preaching to the choir to some extent, but I want to emphasize that. It's in every strata of our society. It's in every ethnic community. We have reduced that. It's nice to be able to say that instead of filing a domestic violence case, you know, every 4.6 days, now we're only filing a domestic violence case once every 7 days. That's still horrible that we're filing one domestic violence murder case a week. That's unacceptable. So we have much to do. And I don't know what the statistics here are in Portland. Maybe they are, unfortunately, or fortunately rather, not as great. Nevertheless, I am confident as I speak that you have a problem that needs addressing too. Obviously, we have to look at many of the issues as to why we've had this reduction, but my gut tells me that awareness of the issue of domestic violence, awareness, has in fact played a huge part in why domestic violence is now viewed as a crime and why we have seen an actual reduction in the number of domestic violence murders. We're talking about awareness of the problem. We're talking about awareness of the fact that domestic violence is going to be treated seriously, that people will go to jail, that there are consequences involved in that act. And believe me, 5 years ago, this was a different situation in Los Angeles. 5 years ago, I dare say, it may have been a different situation right here in Portland. I have been talking about domestic violence for years, certainly before I became the district attorney. I do a lot of reading on this. You don't learn simply by, reacting to your latest case. If you actually read some studies by criminologists and others, and you look at statistics, you look at who's in prison, you learn things. I learned, for example, that every person in California's death row grew up in a family where there's child abuse or domestic violence. Well, bingo, you don't have to be a genius to realize, hey, wait a minute, had we intervened earlier in this, had we broken that cycle of violence when that adult on death row was a youngster, maybe we would have saved a life, certainly would have saved a lot of taxpayer money involved, had we tried to break that cycle of violence much earlier. But as I continued to talk, I really didn't get that much attention. Oh yes, from women groups I'd get attention, and occasionally our equivalent to your commissioners, our board of supervisors would, form a committee, do something. The resources weren't there, the laws weren't there, the sensitivity wasn't there, the police, the judges, probation officers, and even my own prosecutors, the sensitivity, the awareness, the expertise necessary to handle these cases were simply not there. Unfortunately, it took a horrible case, but a case in which national attention was focused on. 1994, former wife of a former football player, and all of a sudden, you begin to see attention focused on this problem. And yes, I was criticized immediately after the occurrence in that case because I was on national television, considerably on national television, but I was on national television and National Public Radio and others talking about one thing: domestic violence. It's time to take a look. It's not just this one case. We have cases like this throughout our country too often, almost every day. Why are you just focusing on this one case? But it was done. I took advantage of that opportunity and went forward. We had many members of the media who finally decided, let's take a look at this issue. We had, the week after, we had Time Magazine comes out with this front page or front cover story that shows a woman with two black eyes, and it says, when violence hits home. And it's really talking about the epidemic of domestic violence. This is just one example of this, that finally we're getting some attention focused on this. Even the local media finally was taking a look. Well, domestic violence is apparently larger than we thought. Well, yes. I think the awareness, and again, underline the awareness, of the severity and the enormity and the prevalence of this problem shocked a lot of people. Some of us knew, but that's what your responsibility is today, to help continue with that awareness. We must keep awareness up to keep homicides down, and I mean that. This will go up, and you'll see the media ignore it, and it'll start going down again. You have to keep it at a high level if you're going to keep homicides down. Your report, as I said, an extremely valuable report. I hope this is going to be used as an example for other jurisdictions, other cities, other counties throughout the country. This is what you have to do. It has to be a public-private partnership. You have to have a leader. And in this case, it was the City Club of Portland that was a leader here in terms of going forward with this. We're talking, however, about domestic violence, and now here's where I want to try and expand your concept of what domestic violence is. When you conjure domestic violence, my guess is you immediately think, well, there are two adults who are involved, and that's true. Most of the time, that's a situation. But you also have children who are victimized directly or indirectly. That's why no longer do I call my division the domestic violence division. We call it the family violence division. You also have dating violence that must be a part of what you include in your definition of domestic violence. It's a huge problem. Very little documentation on this. There's been some studies, and I'll talk about this briefly. But those are the three things that I want to talk about. I know that right here, thank you very much. Excuse me. That your district attorney, Michael Shrunk, who is a very sensitive, very creative and aggressive, professionally aggressive, prosecutor, has taken a real significant lead. He had a vertical domestic violence unit before we had one. And, to his credit, as a prosecutor in the district attorney's office for so long, I too realized the invidiousness of domestic violence. And I realized the problems with prosecuting domestic violence cases, the extra work that was required. But this is something that has to be done if you are going to successfully prosecute these cases. I talked about the cycle of violence. You don't break a cycle of violence by initiating a prosecution of a case and then the victim coming in saying, I don't want to testify, I don't want to cooperate, everything is okay now. You don't do it if you say, fine. What you have to do is you have to be able to move forward in a much more professional, aggressive way. And that's why I formed our Family Violence Division. This division specifically handles domestic violence cases. Unfortunately, too many of them are homicides. We prosecute the most violent recidivist batterers. And this division only handles the felonies, not the misdemeanors. We have loads and loads of misdemeanors. As an aside here, the only prosecutors who handle misdemeanors have been specially selected and trained to handle those cases. I have over 1,000 prosecutors in my office. Not everyone wants to handle these cases, fine. I have enough that want to handle these cases, but they'll only handle it if they receive the training before they handle their first case. My Family Violence Division is currently handling 45 murder cases. Now that involves child homicides as well as adult domestic violence homicide cases. We have a number of attorneys, investigators, victim advocates, and support staff who are assigned to it. It is, as I said, I think very effective because I saw through my own experience that the only way you successfully prosecute these cases is if you build a bond with your victim. And that is absolutely critical. And that bond is with the prosecutor, but it's also with the victim advocate, who is there and will be there with your victim at all times. Going into court for any kind of a court proceeding, the victim advocate is there as your victim's friend. Absolutely critical. We do it. We need more. You need more. We also have been working with the other people in the criminal justice system, be it the probation department, sensitizing them. These are serious cases. It is a crime. No, just because it happened in the household doesn't mean that it's not a crime. It is a crime. And you have to treat those cases as seriously as we believe that they must be treated. And there's been a change in the outlook there. But we really concentrate on our victim. We have to make the victim understand that if you don't care about your own safety, you've got to care about your kids. There was one newspaper that had a two-page spread. There's a small local newspaper in Los Angeles. After this one case I referred to, it came up, everyone started looking on domestic violence. They found out in the previous year, 79 women had been killed. What they did is they published the photograph of every woman. They showed the area from where they lived and a little of the circumstances. Then they had some statistics. How many kids were now motherless? How many kids didn't have any parent? It goes on like this. How many kids were killed, etc. Dramatic impact. We bring that out. I had it blown up. It's in every one of our offices. I have 45 offices throughout the county. And I said, as a last resort, you show them that. Number one, that we don't want their photograph to appear on something like that. But number two, we don't want their kids to be another statistic. And for the most part, that usually gets to the mother, especially when you start talking about the kids. But we also aggressively prosecute the case with or without the victim's cooperation. And that's a controversial decision. Some people believe I'm wrong in that decision. I am satisfied that's the correct decision. Our fear always is when a victim doesn't want to prosecute, what is the real reason she doesn't want to prosecute? Is it because things are okay now? This was truly an aberration? Very doubtful. It could be that she has been threatened, she has been beaten some more, she's been threatened she's going to be killed, the kids are going to be taken away from her, or it's very indirect. Hey, you know, I haven't worked in 10, 15 years, I have no skills. He has control of all my credit cards, the checkbook, all the money. I can't do it. I can't make it. And so we have to work with that mother. What you have to do, what we have to do, is really take the action that I believe stops the battering, that stops the violence, and that is the prosecution. And there's some people who say, well, you really don't have to get that far. Just let them go to counseling. We used to do that. It does not work. Everyone will nod, yes, we'll go to counseling. They go to counseling, and maybe it works occasionally. Most of the time it doesn't. We hear time and again, especially the batterer who used to go to that counseling, okay? You see, that's all they're going to do to me. They're going to send me to go get some counseling. I'm still in control of you, and you better remember that. So you go forward with the prosecution. I'm not interested in breaking up families. I'm interested in stopping the violence. And you stop the violence through your available tools. And one of the available tools is a prosecution, even a minor offense, a misdemeanor battery type of a case. You go forward with that prosecution. If you have a sensitive judge and you've worked with your probation office, then there are going to be immediate consequences. And the immediate consequences are going to be you are going to jail. You're going to be sentenced to a year in county jail. but you're not going to have to serve all that time. You'll be sentenced to 20 to 30 days in county jail so that you understand what it's like. And now you're going to be placed on probation for 3 years. And the probation is for the next year, once a week, you, and ordinarily the woman, will go to counseling. And you will report to me, the judge, not the probation office, every week, your attendance. And if you don't show up, you're going to jail for the year. It works. It gets their attention. Nothing's 100%. When I say it works the vast majority of times. I saw in your report suggestions for increased district attorney staff. I'm told that your DA's office has 5 deputy district attorneys and 1 intern working full-time on domestic violence. Even with that strong commitment of resources, it's not enough. Apparently, that office is reviewing about 500 new domestic violence cases each month. So you have a problem here. Plus 100 violations of restraining orders. That's a huge number of cases. For 5 deputy district attorneys, you're not getting the job done. To the extent that you can help, they need some additional help. But I hope you understand that even with the focused efforts of law enforcement and prosecutors, there are some cases that cannot be prosecuted because the victim won't testify or other evidence is simply not available. Other difficult cases, however, as I said, can proceed without the cooperation if the district attorney's office has enough specially trained deputies, and your police officers have also been specially trained so that they can have the evidence that perhaps we haven't received in the past. And you've documented this. It's the photographs. It's the spontaneous statements. It's taking the kids in another room. What did you see? You write that down. You've got that. That is strong evidence. I think as concerned citizens, you can't just stop there. I mean, you have to continue to work with elected representatives, state, local representatives, to increase the funding. Work with your district attorney in terms of obtaining more grants. Find out what he needs. Find out what the probation office needs. This can all be done. Been talking generally there about domestic violence. Let's talk about dating violence for a moment, please. Dating violence, I think, is maybe not epidemic, but it's a huge problem. We have had some of our counselors who've gone to some of our local high schools, and from their conversations with young women, they have reported back, shockingly, that better than 75% of the girls, they said, they have been or are involved in dating violence situations. That's incredible. And remember, this is a real secret. If you think adult domestic violence is a secret, usually dating violence is even a better kept secret. This is a very vulnerable age. We all remember that, especially you women. I think you remember this. If you're 12, 13, 14, 15 years of age, there is a real self-image problem that a lot of teenagers have, especially girls have, perhaps especially if they're dating an older boy. So they keep this secret. How do you get that information? That's something that you and I have to work on. I don't have any magic answer to that. Certainly teachers should be responsible when they see something, a pattern, that they have to report that. There's no law that requires that at this point that I'm aware of. But I want to just quickly talk about some of the cases, if I might. We recently completed a juvenile case this spring. It was a case involving 2 teenagers, both 15 years of age. It was a classic controlling domestic violence situation. The boy tried to alienate the girl from her family, told her what to wear, who to talk to, insisted that she carry a pager that he bought, and he would page 187 if she didn't respond instantly. Well, 187 is a penal code section for murder in California. The police saw them arguing on the street, saw the boy shaking the girl, and sent them both to their respective homes. The boy then called the girl, begged to see her, promising never to hurt her, arrived at the home, dragged her by her hair into her bedroom, slashed her legs and face with scissors, ripped up the phone cords. This young lady is truly physically, emotionally scarred for life. Unfortunately, the abuse sometimes leads to murder too. And we're talking about something that was dating violence at teenage years. Just recently, we filed a case of a 17-year-old girl who was shot in the head by her 18-year-old boyfriend in the front of her mother and younger brother. The teenagers had been in an ongoing violent dating relationship that very few people knew about. But unfortunately, there were some adults who knew about it who had not taken any action whatsoever. We also have the situation of cases of teenagers who have a child and are living together, usually in the home of one of their parents. We're talking about teenagers usually in the age of 15, 16, 17 years of age. In one case, we had a juvenile defendant who was certified to be tried as an adult because he attacked the 17-year-old mother of his child with a hot iron, branded her back, burned her face, so no other man would want to see her. But dating violence also involves a statutory rape. And I know sometimes this is very controversial, and I went into this doubting, wait a minute, what are we getting into here in statutory rape? And I'll touch on this a little bit, and if you have more questions about this, I'll be happy to fill in the blanks. I'm not going to go into all the law. It has been documented that the majority of teenage mothers being impregnated, that the majority of teenagers, mothers, are being impregnated by adult men, 67%. That's why in California there's an effort to enforce new statutory rape laws. We realize they're far-reaching in the consequences, but we believe they're necessary. One alarming statistic is that approximately 1/3 of these cases in our office also involve dating violence. The state recently gave us a grant to prosecute statutory rape cases and to reach out to the public to attempt to stop the incidence of statutory rape. We formed a special unit, and in the first year we have filed more than 200 felony cases. Right now, I'll just give you one example. We're prosecuting a case in which a man was finally arrested at age 27, accused of having 6 girlfriends under the age of 18, some as young as 13. He's alleged to have fathered 10 children, none of whom he's supporting. We're limited in what we can say about the case because the case is still ongoing, but this is a classic example of the cycle of violence that I'm talking about. One of our family, let me segue into the next area if I might. I think perhaps one of the most serious, if not the most serious consequence of domestic violence is its effect on children, the children who are in the household where the adult domestic violence is taking place. Those of us in the criminal justice system have long suspected what the researchers are now telling us, that violent behavior is often homegrown, that children are exposed to violence in their home are much more likely to end up being violent criminals themselves. Violent youths are 4 times more likely to come from abusive homes. As adults, they become the batterers, they beat their wives and children. 80% of batterers come from battering home, 80%. Children in homes of domestic violence are victimized in a number of ways. First of all, they die. Last year in Beverly Hills, a father killed his 2 children, they were babies, and then he killed himself. He had previously abused their mother, who was in the process of divorcing him. We file approximately 50 child homicide cases in Los Angeles County every year. Many of these were children who were in homes where in fact there was domestic violence. Here's something that we have that maybe, I'm not sure whether you have it or not. If you don't, it's probably something for you to look at. We have a countywide child death review team that has recently begun to track the correlation so we can better understand the problem and effectively help children in homes of domestic violence. In other words, every time there's a child homicide or child death, not just homicide, a child death, this team of experts examines that case to determine, is this a homicide? What are the circumstances, if so, surrounding the homicide? We have found cases where it had been determined it wasn't a homicide initially. Once you start looking at the facts and the circumstances, it is clear that we had a homicide. It was not an accidental death. But children also suffer physical and emotional abuse. We know that the research shows that in households in which children are seriously abused, domestic violence is more than 40% increased. An estimated 3 to 4 million children yearly suffer the emotional devastation of witnessing one parent beat another. Too often, children are caught in the crossfire. The crossfire of an abuser's rampage, and they themselves become seriously injured or sometimes even killed as they try and usually protect their mother. Again, the members of our family violence team are specially trained to work with children. We try and lessen the trauma of the children involved, because too often, unfortunately, we have to use these children as witnesses. Sometimes they're the only witnesses we have, and it's a very, very difficult situation. Recently, a local group, our Domestic Violence Council, donated to the District Attorney's Office a special children's room, toys, books, videos, to make it a little more friendly for children. And it really has. It's near my office, and I go by there and you see them using it, and it's helped considerably in terms of preparing them to go forward into the courtroom. Obviously, we have trained advocate witnesses who specialize in just working with children. It is absolutely critical. And as, I guess, sometimes necessary, as I said, we do call these children, and there's nothing that you can do. When we had one case in which the only evidence that we had was the evidence of an 8-year-old who could identify her father as being the person that had his foot on his mother's heart, as she put it. I mean, that was the link. Her mother had been stomped to death by her father. We have too many of these cases, and I have examples, but I don't think you need to hear more examples particularly. Oh, I do want to tell you about one, because sometimes you don't know or you question the impact that the violence is having on children. So I need to tell you about one case, because it was a learning tool for us too. This is a man who killed his wife. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison under California law. But the facts were disturbing. He had 4 children. 2 of them were 4 and 5, and 2 were a little older. The 4 and 5-year-old were present in the bedroom when the argument ensued. The man was drunk. They were fighting about their car. The man tried to literally bash in his wife's head with a hammer, and when the handle broke, he continued the attack with a pipe. He killed his wife. One of the 2 slightly older children had run off to call 911. When she came back, she saw her 4-year-old sister cuddling her mother, who was bloodied and who was laid dying. Our prosecutor, before the actual plea took place, had to work with the children, because they are going to be our main witnesses. The older youngster seemed to be aloof and cold and distant from this. So our prosecutor talked to them, was disturbed still by the matter-of-fact nature of it. But, Jimmy, would you take this? As she prepared to leave, this older daughter brought a drawing And the drawing that's blown up here that I will show you as we unfold this is exactly her drawing. And the drawing shows her mother in bed, her head bloody, and the children all in tears. It was poignant. It was direct. And you can see the impact that it had on this youngster, though we had not seen it at all. Thank you. You can take it down. Okay, what can you do? You've already started. I'm telling you, this is a fabulous document. What you have to do is continue your campaign for public awareness, because that's really how you're going to reduce substantially domestic violence. You have to carry through the recommendations. You have to see that others carry through with the recommendations here. I know you have a strong group of individuals and are committed to following this. Let me recommend that you push your recommendation to form a domestic violence awareness committee. This is an ongoing committee that perhaps can meet, once a month. We have one group, and this is when you bring the public and private sector in and together. And let me tell you, it's incredibly effective in keeping the level of awareness up. It's absolutely critical that you do this. I suggest, too, that from this group right here, from the City Club, that you have a group of individuals who will meet, perhaps at regular intervals, with various elected officials, county commissioners, your district attorney, your probation officers, others, to see what are we doing. All right, we met 2 months ago. What are you doing now? What are we doing in the private sector, in other words, to gain more public awareness? Secondly, I urge you in every possible way to continue to support the funding, the adequate funding of shelters. This is something that is not just a problem in Portland, it's a problem every place. When I read in the report, I believe it was 90% of all the calls to your shelters had to be turned away because you did not have room. There shouldn't be one legislator who would be willing to put up his or her head to say, I haven't tried to get more money for you. Because every time an adult is turned away, you are probably invariably turning children away too. And where are they going to go if there is not a shelter? That's absolutely paramount that you do that. Set some goals. Know what the funding is this year from the state, from the local government, for shelters, and then set a goal. Let's increase that by 50% or 150%, whatever it is. And don't be taken by numbers. Well, we've increased it by 100%. Well, big deal. If you start out with $1,000, you get $10,000. That's still not much money, is it? So, look at it in terms of what you can do. So, I mentioned this, I'll emphasize it. Work with your local district attorney's office. Mike is a great guy. He is committed to this, but he needs your power too to even make it more effective. Same with the probation department. Work with your police, same way. Are they sufficiently sensitized? And don't think it's just one police department. It's every police department in your county that you have to deal with, from your smallest to your largest. You might also, another suggestion, find people to help fund a room like we did in our office. It really doesn't cost that much money, but sometimes it's magical in terms of what the little things that can be done. Work with your hospitals. Work with your physicians and your nurses. I was at lunch yesterday near the Reed campus, and we went to a restaurant. This is an aside here, but I learned something by this experience. We were having lunch, and this couple walked in, and the woman recognized me and started talking, and she asked why I was here. I said I was speaking at the City Club on domestic violence, and they thought that was a good thing. And so I said, "You're from Portland?" I said, "No." I said, "Oh." from Coral Gables, and it turns out that the man is a physician, and we started talking about this. Great idea. I don't think we have it in California. I don't know if you have it here. In Florida, every physician is required to attend one domestic violence sensitivity training for an entire day every year. Every year. I thought that's great. And he went on to tell me, he said, oh, and they're very strict about this. If you don't go, at a minimum, you are fined substantially, $10,000. And he knows of people who've been suspended for not going. All right, now, Oregon's a progressive state, aren't you? Don't laugh. This is something that I'm going to pursue in California. I think it's great. I want to find out with nurses too. Find out, you go and talk to some of your nurses' unions or whatever. It's sometimes the nurses who have a much better bond than the physicians. Too often nurses and physicians, listen to the victim and say, well, please don't tell anyone else, but this is what happened. You have a law that requires medical officials to report when they suspect that there is domestic violence. I'm amazed at how many disregard that if they think they're really doing a favor, quote, favor, to the victim. Well, it's obvious to me that those nurses as well as physicians need some training so that they can understand the breadth of the problem. And you're not doing them any favor by not reporting this. So work with the nurses as well. Do something else, a couple other things. Judges. What good does it do if you're able to get the police to really do the work, you get the prosecutor to get the work done, and most importantly, you're able to get the victim into court to cooperate, and you get a conviction if the judge says, hey, man, this is a domestic violence case, and nothing happens? It's the worst possible result. So you have to work as I have, and this is tough, to get the judges to go through some training on domestic violence. It works miracles, it really does. But you can do that. Second thing, involving judges. Consider and work with your DA here as to whether you should have domestic violence courts. That is, courts that are simply designated, that's all you're going to do, is handle domestic violence cases. We have several courts, this is at the municipal court level, misdemeanors, where it is a specially trained, selected judge who comes in with the program, and everyone knows you're not going to fool this judge. And if you violate probation, guess what? You're going back to the same judge. It's not going to be another judge who might forget about it or have a different attitude about it. Miracles, fabulous. It really works. So consider that possibility. Continue your legislative involvement. See what laws that you need. Work with the DA. Get the muscle behind it. The DA, I would imagine in this state, has a lot of ability to move things in your capital, Salem, but much more powerful if you have a community group who's also behind it to get things done. The team effort, I guess is what I'm saying, is so much more effective than any single group or single individual ever will be. Look at stalking laws. We use our stalking laws in California almost on a daily basis in domestic violence cases. We have a separate law that's designated as a domestic violence assault type case. It's not your general assault, domestic violence. But in addition to that, we have stalking laws that apply here. And if none of you have ever dealt with anyone who's been stalked before, you don't have a complete appreciation for the incredible fear and very often, most of the time, a justifiable fear of what's involved. The stalking laws permit us to go in where there's still no real abuse. A couple more things, and then I want to get involved in the dialogue here, is work with your schools. Remember dating violence. We have teams of prosecutors that go in, adopt fifth grade classes for the entire school year. We talk about a lot of things, but one thing we talk about is adult domestic violence. We talk about dating violence. Start the education process early on. You heard about our 800 number. I know that you have a similar number. Number one, I'd urge you to make it a toll-free number. Get people who speak more than one language, because you're not that different than Los Angeles. We also have this little card that we give to police officers, and it has a detachable little perforated tag at the bottom, and it's the 800 number to your Safe-Way-Out hotline. And if anyone calls this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in 6 different languages, they can get information about how do I get out of this dangerous situation. A police officer can palm this when he or she doesn't have sufficient evidence to prove that a crime has been committed, but they believe something has happened. They'll have this. If a man calls in, they're not going to get any information. And it's not that we're biased. It's that 95% of the time, the domestic violence victim is a woman. So try something like that. The last thing, do everything, anything you can to continue public awareness. Write op-ed pieces. Have special programs in which the media is forced to come so that there's a story about it. Take the opportunity of the month of domestic violence month in October for various forums. Get some of your large corporate entities perhaps to get involved. We, for example, are getting Shell Oil involved. They're going to put, what do they call it? A pump topper. The commercials, the pieces of cardboard that they have that are advertising some things, what they're going to do for the entire month, they're going to put on every Shell station, they're going to put the 800 number, but they're also going to put a message about domestic violence. You can do things like this. I mean, there's no end to your creativity in terms of what you can do and what you should do. Please understand, and this is my last comment, that you can and should do everything and anything possible to stop the violence. I think your relentless dedication will ultimately result in saving lives. And I mean that. You, each one of you can hear my voice, you can save a life if you're willing to step forward and be relentless and dedicated in terms of making the public aware of the evils and the pervasiveness of domestic violence. With that done, I spoke a little longer than wanted to, but wanted to get the message. Please, it's my opportunity now to hear from you, if I might, Fran.
Thank you very much. That was a message that I think we all took to heart, and will hopefully move forward with what you had to suggest. One of the questions I had was, you talk about developing awareness. Are there special programs to help children become aware of domestic violence and ways for them to come forward to develop a relationship with anyone to help deal with domestic violence in their homes too?
Again, no magic answers there in terms, is there awareness? I mentioned the 5th grade effort that we have. It's amazing what we learn when we start talking to these kids, because it's the same prosecutor that works with the same 5th grade class the entire school year. And it's an amazing number of kids that come, and there's a close bond that is developed over a short period of time and what they tell us. And so we try and help there. What we're trying to do too is we're trying to develop some videos. We have some domestic violence videos, but we're looking at it in terms of aiming the message at the child. If the child, for example, ever goes into a doctor's room, have some videos there, talk about domestic violence, those kinds of things. We haven't fully developed those, but it is something that is obviously needed. I am as interested in your ideas in terms of what we can do. We're also working on a coloring book that can be distributed at school and other places where we talk about the evils of domestic violence.
Hello, my name is Leslie Hildula with the City Club. For everyone who's been inspired, get out a pen. 4th Tuesday, 4:30, we are meeting. Please, you're all welcome. It'd be great to see you all there. My question is, The victims advocates that you talked about, I think we're struggling in this area. Could you talk a little bit about how that's funded and organized?
Certainly. It's funded in two ways. It's funded through the district attorney's office. It's just part of our normal funding. This has been an evolution because at first we had tremendous resistance. Said, well, why do you need that? Let someone else do that or get volunteers to do it. And we do have volunteers. We have a number of volunteers, full-time volunteers who've also been specially trained. But you also have to have a dedicated professional staff there in doing it. So it is primarily, we recruit them into this, and this is all they're going to do. For the most part, these are people who want to do it. Some of them, a good number of them, have been victims themselves of domestic violence. And so they've worked through it. They now want to help others. We have also received some state monies for this, special grants at times. And I think you can use this as a demonstration grant. I mean, just give you an example of how you might do it. You go and talk to Mike, say, all right, now how many cases did you lose last year as a result of the victim just disappearing, leaving, refusing to cooperate? And you don't have a victim advocate. And I know they have a victim advocate. Assume they didn't. Now you put in your victim advocate and you compare how many cases did you lose. You will see a dramatic increase in the number of cases that stay together because of that victim advocate.
Good afternoon. Erwin Mandel, City Club member. For the past 2 years, I've been a member of the Citizens Budget Advisory Committee for the District Attorney's Office here in Multnomah County. And each year, it seems to me, we're constantly struggling with what services do we diminish. I don't think any of these programs can ever be put forth successfully until the state of Oregon, the city of Portland, and the county of Multnomah County finds a rational basis for providing funds for all of these things. Now, that's not my question, but it's a background. I do have a real question for you. Of the one felony domestic violence case that you file each week, 52 a year roughly, I believe you said,
yes. What
proportion of these have shall we say, exacerbating factors due to alcohol or other drugs?
Well, the vast majority of our cases, domestic violence cases, involve either the direct or the indirect use of drugs, including alcohol. Most of the cases, I can't say that. A number of our cases involve the violence at the time that the individual, usually the man, is in fact under the influence, but certainly not always, by a long shot.
I'm Susan Pierce, City Club member. I'm also a home health and hospice nurse. And you're right, doctors and nurses are kind of a front line. We're reminded of this from time to time. I agree, I think we probably need a lot more training. But you haven't mentioned the form of domestic violence that I am most apt to see, and that is elder abuse. Could you touch on that a little?
Surely. We have a special unit that handles elder abuse cases, and this is physical elder abuse as well as financial elder abuse. This is going to be a growing area. As our society gets older, as we all live longer, it is just going to happen. We have seen it happen. They are exceedingly difficult cases to handle because often the elder abuse is not direct in terms of assaults and batteries, it's neglect. Those are exceedingly difficult cases to prosecute because who's responsible for it? And yet, we have prosecuted them, and you're going to go forward with it, but I have to tell you that we have not come up, and I have one person that I've talked to all the time, the person in charge of this division, who's come up with any kind of a comprehensive plan. I mean, it's very squishy right now, and I haven't had anything where I've said, I want to put my name to this, and this is what we can do, because there are so many little nuances about this that make those cases perhaps the most difficult cases to grab a hold of and do something with. But it is certainly a problem that is there, that will be there, and for any of us who are going to live as long as we hope to live, let's hope we resolve some issues before.
Hi, my name is Molly Franks.
Hi.
I graduated from Reed in May, and I've also worked at a domestic violence shelter for 3.5 years. And in the years that I've worked in the movement against domestic and sexual violence, almost everyone I've worked with has been a woman. And so I was kind of surprised to hear you speaking today. I wonder if you could comment on what you see as your role as a man, or the role of men in general in the movement against domestic and sexual violence.
I haven't been asked that question directly. Indirectly, number one, I come from a family where there was no physical domestic violence. My dad yelled a lot at everyone, but that was the nature of my family. I'm primarily of Mexican ethnicity, even though I have an Italian surname. I saw a lot of it. I grew up a fairly humble background in a lower middle class at best family, where I did see a lot of domestic violence going on, and I saw men acting, I believe, simply inappropriately, both verbally and physically, and that just stayed with me as I continued to grow older and learn more. And I viewed my job as the district attorney, not simply as one where you treat every case as fairly and professionally as possible, and you seek justice in every case, be it a conviction or saying we should dismiss this case.